Mute, start video. Hello?
Hi.
Hi.
No, it's a delay.
Hi, everybody.
Hello. Hey.
It's been a long day.
Okay. I think I need to turn this way. Okay, yeah. Yeah. Okay, Cece is actually here at the farm with me. So.
Hi. See where you can see me.
Actually, you gotta turn that way. That's not, the light is this way.
Oh, okay. Okay, I think I'm pretty good. Got a view of the farm, Catholic City Farm. So we have like a kind of delayed. Hi, I'm Farmer Kathegu, Katongo. Okay. Thank you, Matthew Rayford. It's me, Cece. I'm going by Kathegu now. And my farm is Urban Shamba ATL. Matthew Rayford, Chef Rayford, he and I are friends, and I haven't formally informed him that I'm going by my Kenyan name, Kathegu. So now you know. So that's Gabego, Katongo, and Urban Shamba ATL, not Urban Ham ATL. So I'm happy to be here. Hi, Karen, Washington.
What's up?
Good to be with you.
Same here.
Yeah. We're on the same network, so we're having some feedback. So on a different corner of the farm, so we can have this conversation.
I'm ready when you are. Yes, so I guess I'll start. My name is Karen Washington. I tell people I'm a farmer. I grow food. I feed people, body and mind. I am so glad to be on this recording with so many people who have been talking all morning long. Juneteenth, you all, Juneteenth, about Juneteenth and the power that it has emanated throughout the day, rejoicing. And so I'm glad to be on this panel with Julia and I think it's Gathetu, to talk about seeds lay dormant. And I guess I'll talk about that in my respect, because as a seed planted by my ancestors, you know, I was dormant. You know, I was dormant when it came to agriculture. But who knew that this hair that was kinky and nappy and a big afro had the seeds of life from my ancestors that came here and that gave me the strength to be who I am today. Because it wasn't always like that. You know, the realization of my work in agriculture did not come until I was, I think, mid 30s. Back in the day, we were called Negroes and colored people. And my relationship to food and agriculture was slavery, because that was put in my brain. But then, you know, when I got to plant that seed and saw how my plants were growing and took a bite, all of a sudden I was hooked to a whole new world. And when I put my hands in the soil, I all of a sudden had that instant gratification of why I became a farmer and what I'm doing today when it comes to growing food and food and social justice. So for me, seeds lay dormant no more, because finally we know the truth about agriculture. We know the truth why we were here, y'all. You know, for years the story has always been, we've been here because, you know, we came bound in chains, and we were here because, you know, we were dumb and we were strong. But the fact is that we were here because of our knowledge of agriculture. We brought the seeds in our hair to a deep south swampy condition that correlated to what was in our main country of Africa. And we brought that knowledge in our hair so that we can grow the food for this land. But we never got the recognition. We never got the recognition that the seeds that fed this country came out of us, came out of our hair. And so as you go along and you look at agriculture, and we change this narrative on why we grow food, we are so empowered now. So many of our young people want to grow food now, want to become farmers because they understand our legacy, our relation to food, the fact that we are agrarian people, the fact that if you can look at the color of your skin, you know that that color is soil. And so for me, the seeds lay dormant no more, because I have been empowered by the fact that my ancestors and their wisdom and that lineage of seeds in my kinky, nappy hair set ground to feed this country. So I like to pass it on to Julia, since I did that introduction. So Julia, take it away, girlfriend.
Jamila, this is your cue to come on in.
Oh, that was me. Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Jamila Norman. I am the owner operator of Patrick City Farms here in Atlanta. And for us and for me, when we talk about seeds lay dormant, just thinking about, on my side, my family is Caribbean, and my family's Caribbean, and my great grandmother was the last person to farm. Great grandmother, great grandfather were the last people to farm in my family. And so seeds lay dormant is sort of like this ancestral, deep in the DNA call into the land that like took, you know, 2 to 3 generations to like resurface. And that's kind of what I represent. And I had an opportunity to go back to Jamaica. Great grandmother lived until 103 years old. And I was able to be well into my farming career and ag when I had the opportunity to like go back and celebrate her 100th birthday and talk to her about that, and just see, you know, her being happy and excited that, you know, someone in the family sort of like took up the calling to like go back to the land and, you know, take up agriculture. So it's just, you know, I was born and raised in New York, moved out to the South, but I had just from a young age always been just drawn to nature and the outdoors, and that took me to environmental engineering and such. And then coming back to the South, I don't know, like farming, just like
Looking for the sun and soil.
yeah, exactly. Farming just like makes sense. And I think it just, for me, I entered engineering as a way to solve environmental problems, and feeling like that was the medium by which I can like really benefit and help community and my community and Black communities specifically. But came to realize like the simple solution, the simple, elegant solution. And it's just like, grow good food right where people need it. And that's like, you know, that's what I've been doing. And Cece and I met each other in the park in the neighborhood, and we both had the same vision of just like growing healthy food for our families and and it's been a journey ever since. So those seeds have definitely sprouted, come up from out of the darkness of the soil, just sitting and waiting, and this is their time, and they are, you know, highly abundant. I mean, it's just insane. I mean, it just it's just magical every time, like how small a seed is and how much can come forth out of like one seed, and just like that DNA in the seed is the same, you know, like that DNA in us and that ancestral calling is just all there. So yeah, that's Jamila at Patchwork in Atlanta. So
Are we still connected?
Yes, you are connected. Gatego.
oh, okay.
No,
Did you do your introduction already, CC?
No, I didn't.
Okay,
So,
well, I think this is your
yeah.
cue.
So I'm Kafegu Katongo. And let me get myself into the. My name is Kafegu Katongo, and my name is Kikuyu. I was born and raised in Kenya, and my parents immigrated to America in 1983, specifically Atlanta, West End, Southwest Atlanta. And so seeds lay dormant for me is actually returning to my agrarian roots, returning to the way of life of my people, living sustainably in close connection with the earth and in relationship with the food that we eat, and healing from the land inwards. And so for me, this journey has really been about being with my culture. The seed that got awakened was, you know, my memories of being in the soil with my grandparents. My mom, who always kept a garden wherever we went. My dad was a preacher back home, and of course he was sent from place to place to spread the word. And everywhere we went, my mother kept a garden. And we, you know, everything that we ate, my mother grew, and everything that we ate came from the land. We didn't go to the grocery stores or anything like that. And of course, the food tasted very differently. And so, you know, I remember when we all came to the US, and we were just so put off by the food here. It was like the most shocking and horrible experience with food. In fact, like, I think I was constantly sick from eating what my parents bought. And it took a while for us to really get adjusted to the food in the grocery stores, and, like, you know, and its toll on our health, my parents especially. But and really coming back to the soil, as Jamila said, is reawakening, reactivating our ancestral DNA. You know, like, for me, coming from Africa, you know, like, where Africa is the cradle of, like, agriculture, right? And it's interesting enough because, like, outside of America, the word that we get is like, come to America. It's like the land of opportunity, and, you know, streets paved with gold and all the things, you know, that you want. And you're not, you know, there isn't like this narrative, like, what you have is amazing. You know, it's centuries of culture, and, you know, a way of life that has existed for generations, and all of a sudden with colonialism, that all of it became wrong. The way of life of the Kikuyu became wrong, right? It's like what happens in colonization, right? You just get your identity complete. It's white supremacy, it's racism, it's like getting your identity completely erased, right? You can't speak your language, you can't grow the food that you used to grow, you can't have the rituals. All of that was forbidden, you know, because now you have to be British, you have to be a colonized person who's now having to adjust and create a new identity, right? And so just being on this journey has brought me back to, like, asking questions like, what did my grandmother and my grandfather eat? You know, what do the plants around their huts look like? You know, like, what did dinner look like, you know, because it certainly doesn't look like what it is post-colonial. I mean, so not to go on and on, but, you know, so there's this kind of like rediscovering of self, right, through land and through seeds and through food and community. And so, you know, I'm here in Atlanta, and I'm doing the work, and I'm rediscovering my roots. I'm reclaiming my name, which actually means seed, calabash. Gazebo is a nickname. It means calabash, and a calabash is a multi-purpose tool. It's like one of the, you know, most used tool by women in my culture. It also means seed, which ironically, you know, like it fits me as a farmer, right? Always growing in what I do. And so I'm here in this community, and I'm rooted here. I have been rooted here for over 30 years, moving away from the West End, going to college. You know, like Jamila, I love nature. My entire life growing up in Kenya was centered around nature, connection with trees, fruit trees. Jamila and I are like renegades over here. It's like we're just outdoors having fun, like growing food. And so I majored in wilderness leadership and experiential education, which is because I wanted to know how to be a wilderness woman, you know, like survive in the wild, like my ancestors, you know, just able to go and find food, you know, all of that. And but what I learned in doing this work, being a wilderness instructor in the South particularly, is that it was connected with slavery and brutality and the violence on Black people, like, and knowing that history, like, it just, whenever I would be in North Georgia, in the back of my head, I would like, I hope I don't run into anyone with a Confederate flag and a shotgun, you know, like I didn't feel safe being in the woods and in nature in America, especially in the South. And eventually, like, I just left and wanted to start a farm, wanted to garden, wanted to create a family. And that brought me to West End, started a community garden, went to volunteer, went into Jamila, and the rest is history.
Oh my God.
Rest is the beginning of a revolution. So that's who I am. And so that's how my seed got awoken.
Yep.
And I'm wearing my earrings to represent my Kenyan heritage.
Anything that, yep.
So let me bring Jamila back in.
Okay. All right. So,
Anyone out there have any questions for us?
trying to think.
Anything that we didn't?
So ladies, I'd love to hear from both of you, from all three of you. You're each ancestors for future generations. Can you speak about the visions that you're each planting for future generations?
Oh, well, calling me an ancestor already?
I'm definitely an ancestor. I will work that. I'm 66 years of age. I say I am definitely an ancestor. And what I just try to do is provide seeds for the next generation, to provide a space to make sure that they understand their history. I always tell my youngsters, especially here in the city, take out them Samsung Galaxies and those iPhones and go to your grandparents and great-grandparents and have them talk about what it is growing up on a farm. Get that history and get those stories, and it's so important. So that's the work I try to do.
Okay. I would say for me, especially like why it was super important for me to be in the city growing was for just to have a point of connection for people, because I mean, people are so disconnected from the process, what it looks like, the work that it takes, you know, the conditions under which, you know, we're growing. I mean, obviously we're not in bondage growing here, but nonetheless, it's Georgia, it's hot, it's not glamorous, it's not cute, it's not old McDonald's, it is real work, real labor. And that really makes people think about all kinds of issues, like, okay, maybe, you know, people come and volunteer and they're like, wow, that was a lot of hard work. So maybe when you hear folks talking about paying migrant workers or paying agriculture workers proper wages, then you're like, Yeah, absolutely. Because I went and I worked half a day on a farm, and you deserve whatever it is that you need in terms of like a living wage, or when people like they really understand the value of food when they just have just a connection with it more than just I just go to this grocery store, get something, you have no connection to what that looks like, that there was actually a person that has a family, that has hopes, dreams, and, a life that grew it. It just seems so industrial, but it's a point of connection. And then you meet so many people that are so interested and excited, but they have a little bit of fear. And so they come and they're like, well, how do I get started? Well, my family has land, or, I just something I've been thinking about doing, and how did you do it? And it's like, I just did it. So it's a way of being present and having visibility, and also just showing people that like black farmers are here. We have never left. Just because there's not a lot of representation doesn't mean that we don't exist. People feel like, oh, you're the only black farmer I know. I'm like, first of all, I am not doing anything revolutionary. I'm just growing food. People have been growing food for a very long time. And I am literally one of many generations. I'm just happen to be like in the city, and there's a little bit more visibility. So it's just planting that seed of like knowing and understanding and excitement, and just saying that like it's possible. Is it hard? Yeah. Are you gonna deal with all kinds of racist policies and all kinds of nonsense? Absolutely. But like, why are you doing it, right? And what is your motivation? Because my motivation is like health and wellness for myself, for my family, for my community. It's about, nutrient dense food. It's about like, turning just a green space that was just grass into, all kinds of, biological diversity. And it's about like just like changing the narrative on all the ways that Black people can be, how we do have connection to Earth. And then the other thing is, because we're in the South and we're in Atlanta, and I mean, there are so many people of color, so many Black people in Atlanta. I mean, it still blows my mind every day. And I've been in this city since '92. It's just like, wow, there's just so many Black people here. I love it. But like a lot of the older folks that come by, and they will stop, and they will just come and they're just like stand at the fence, and they're just looking at the farm, and they're like, wow, like you're really doing this? And you can see sort of like that glimmer of like, wow, I mean, like, this is so good to see somebody young and from a different generation, like doing this work. So it's also sort of like that connection, and like saying like all of the work that you guys have done is not in vain. I mean, one of the first people Tisa and I worked with in farming here in Atlanta was an older lady by the name of Miss Lizzie at a church farm, is where we started volunteering and really helping them out. And I mean, Miss Lizzie grew up on a 200?
No, I think it's a 100-acre farm.
100-acre farm.
Not non-mechanized.
Non-mechanized, and that was what their family did, And
taught us a lot.
I mean, so much. And just Miss Lizzie was, golly, had to be in her 70s.
And she was out there sun up to sundown, and just kept the most impeccable garden.
Most impeccable, most abundant, and just was like, this is my retirement. This is where I find peace. This is like, I mean, she was just amazing, And I'm like, look, if Miss Lizzie can do it, like, surely I can. Like, there's nothing I can complain about. So, it's just being present and just showing people like, hey, it's possible. There is life, that you can create a life for yourself on the land in ag, and just, challenging those stereotypes that people have, around people of color. And then also having people see a narrative that's, because people like see Black folks, slavery, agriculture, and that's it. There's a whole history past, slavery that nobody talks about, that acts like there weren't millions of Black farmers that owned millions and millions of acres of land. And we don't talk about like all the positive contributions, all of the transformative cultural contributions that we brought with us to this country that influenced agriculture in a major way in this country, and what we've given as people to America. All of that goes, it's like hidden, and people just focus on slavery, the pain, but yet somehow something keeps calling us and keeps calling people back. And so I'm just here, just doing my part in whatever way that I can to just shine a light and just be like, you guys, it's possible.
One of the questions the audience is asking is like, how do you both as farmers work to heal the soil and make it resilient again?
How do we work to build the soil and make
Heal
it
the
resilient
soil.
again?
People are talking about regenerative soil,
Right.
resilience. Go ahead.
Well, for me, first of all, I believe that I'm a soil farmer. Yeah, I grow soil, and food takes form in that soil, and then in that sense, my work is about protecting the soil and always rebuilding it in a way that it mimics what actually happens in nature through composting, adding organic matter to the soil, letting it rest, break down over time. Before I started my new plot, I actually added, over time, we added leaves, we added, my husband is a carpenter, so often we would have lots of wood shaving, which is great for growing mycorrhizal like fungi in the soil. And so we'd add that. We added compost from our kitchen, just grass clippings after we cut the grass. And over 4 years, our sandy, loamy soil looks dark and rich with it. Actually, when we started, there was, you could hardly, I'm sure there was microorganisms, but there were no decomposers like roly-polies and earthworms and all of these like kind of mealworms, not mealworms, but millipedes, all these things that you want to see in a healthy soil environment, right? And so through composting and crop rotation, companion planting, and just what else do you want to add? Like,
yeah, I mean, we do a lot of mulching. We're in the city, and so we've been fortunate to have access to just all kinds of things that would be considered like waste. So, getting wood chips from tree companies that are just like, cutting down trees, grinding it up, using that in the pathways, getting straw. Mercedes-Benz Stadium had a big Halloween maze, and they must have been hundreds of bales of hay, and then they called us up and was like, hey farmers, do you know how farmers descended on that stadium and got all those bales of hay? I got 50 myself. So always looking for ways to use what essentially people are calling a waste stream, but it's really organic matter, and using that on the farm and constantly building the soil. And I am certified naturally grown, doing all organic practices, but really looking for ways that are mimicking nature, and really just going back to, essentially cultural ways, like Cece was saying, with her people. Exactly. And my mom says all the time, like growing up in Jamaica, she's like, we were organic before organic was a thing, right? Because, the misnomer is like people have been growing organically longer than we've been industrialized or agriculture, right? And so it's not so much that anything new is being created, and it is actually just going back to indigenous ways of doing things that took thousands and thousands of years for people to see, and learn from nature and replicate that. Agriculture is, that is not like a natural thing. Like, that is what humans definitely went into cultivating land, but you want to mimic that in the way that you see in nature as much as possible, so that those systems can continue to be regenerative and it's not extractive. And so you have to build your soil. The soil is where, like, that's the base of being able to grow anything,
it's the ecosystem that basically supports life. And so if you don't have healthy soil, then you don't have healthy plants.
And
We're not adding 1010. We're not adding fertilizers out here. We're not doing Miracle Grow, all that, all those unsustainable practices. And I think like what Jamila was saying about have the privilege or the unique position that we're in to be in an urban center and get all these wastes routed to our farms that allow us to actually build our soil over time. When you think about it, like the more farms that we have in an urban environment, the more we can divert these resources from landfills. People don't like all the trees that come down, the leaves, all the parts, all the leaves that are picked up, they all just end up at the landfill,
which is a shame.
So people also wants a couple of more questions that people want to know about you too. Is like, first of all, what do you need in terms of support to move this iteration of agriculture to the next level of a revolution? That's number one. And number two, how do you reinforce food sovereignty in the work that you do? So the first one is what support you need to move it to a revolution. Next, how do you reinforce sovereignty, food sovereignty in your communities?
I think we have to start by really looking at, we're really looking at the cost of growing food, right? The cost of growing food to our planet, to human beings, to the animal world, to communities around the world, right? When we're consuming something, we're consuming violence, we're consuming like unsustainable ways of life that have been created by this economic system, right? It's just not like this. It's not like this act is divorced from the rest of the world, right? And we have to look at like what it actually costs to grow food. We have to be related to that equation. Like, a lot of, I think we're operating under the assumption of a lie that food is supposed to be cheap.
Yeah.
Right. That's the biggest like lie created by big ag, capitalism, America. In this country, people are spending much less on food. I don't even know what the percentage is.
Less than 20%, maybe 10% of the income on food.
Right? Whereas developing countries, when you look at how much people are spending on food, we're talking about like maybe 90% or higher on the food that they eat, right? But here we have it backwards, and we want it to be, we're not necessarily growing all the food that we eat here, and we want it to be cheap, and we want justice. And we want people's livelihoods to people to thrive all over the world, right? We want justice all over the world. We can't have it. We can't have cheap food and have justice. We can't have cheap food and have Black Lives Matter all over the world, right? Black and brown lives matter all over the world, right? We have to be related to like, what is it? Like, how is it that I'm getting this food? Like I a couple of weeks ago, I was at Trader Joe's, and there was a quart, maybe a little bit bigger than a quart of blueberries. And I'm like, $8.99 for organic blueberries? Like, this is crazy. Like, this is so cheap. And of course, they're imported from Mexico and all of this. And I'm thinking, okay, well, the farmer that grows it and selling it to Trader Joe's is selling it at 30 or 50% below the market.
Way less than that.
Way less than that. Like, how much are the people in Mexico getting paid to pick blueberries? And Jamila and I actually like went out.
We picked blueberries.
We picked blueberries, okay? We picked them, right?
Right. At a living wage.
At a living wage. And
no more than a gallon an hour. You just cannot pick them any faster than that.
You cannot move. We tried. We were like, let's break this record. Nope.
Not possible. So yeah, so I mean, and then the other thing with like the cost of growing food, because I've had people, come to market and, they're like, oh, why is stuff so expensive? This is that and the other. And I'm like, I grow this food, having to buy land in the city, which is not cheap. So first we're talking about land, like farmers now, you know, especially farmers of color who don't have inherited land, anything like that, you're having to buy land at cost now. Whereas the agriculture in this country is on stolen land, right? Stolen first from Native Americans just by force and violence, right? You just came onto that land. Then you have forced labor. So you had all that free labor, right? Then after that, even after the abolition of slavery, then you had the Jim Crow era. And even though you had all these Black farmers that then, even with all the conditions and all of the Jim Crow rules and brutality, still figured out how to put their savings together and were buying land, hundreds and hundreds of acres. Then you had histories of discrimination, you know, through USDA, which was really a policy of continually figuring out how to get land back out of Black people's hands, because there was so much success with Black farmers, because hello,
Right.
we were the ones doing the growing,
doing the work. Right?
We were not just brought here to this country as labor, as just like brute idiot labor. Like, people were brought with knowledge, and they were brought from certain tribes to specific areas because of their knowledge of, you know, growing rice on the coast of Africa, brought to the coast of, you know, southeastern United States. Those that had knowledge of, you know, cattle and things like that, those, you know, that they went out to, you know, ranch country and were able to, like, so they were brought with specific knowledge and put in specific places and were brought with that knowledge so that they can help the system. And now you're asking us to grow food and provide it to community, but keep it cheap. It's impossible, right? And so if we want to subsidize Black farmers and make it so that I would love to just grow food and not think about having to make money off of it, so I can pay my bills, you know, I have 3 children, I have a home, all these things. I would love to be in a position where, hey, all I do is grow food and give it away to my community. But that would take someone underwriting my whole operation. That would take people, you guys want a revolution? Get the land back from the people that have it doing nothing with it into the hands of those. I mean, so many people that are beyond willing and have the passion and have the drive and want to do this work. But there are so many roadblocks in their way, finances being the biggest one. How can I buy land, right? Then all of the money that it takes to operate, the infrastructure, the fencing, the water, like, it takes major money and capital. These are not a cheap endeavor.
And many of us really in this journey, Jamila and I specifically have, when we started our farm operation and we put all our financial resources, our energy, everything, you know, and it takes about 7 years to really get a farm operation up and running, unless you're walking straight into an operation that already has the infrastructure ready for you to put the seed in the ground, harvest it, process it, the trucks, all of that, refrigeration, market, done. If you're walking into that situation, which many of us are not, we're starting from zero.
Literally a patch of grass.
And a lot of us are not just starting from zero and gift of land or like land that we're paying for. We also have student loans that we're bringing into this mix right here in this country, right? So we're carrying debt into into a line of work that actually, like, the profits are not, the return on input or an investment is slow, right? And not guaranteed, because of course there's all the other things that are,
there's
like
weather, there's climate change, which is real.
Climate change is real.
There's racism and white supremacy. If you go to market and people don't buy from you because they're willing to go support other farmers, and you're
Especially
sort of like the last,
restaurants.
I mean, just all kinds of things. I mean, we've had people that we worked with in restaurants for years, and they're like, oh, are you still doing that farming thing? I'm like, this is my farm. Hello, this is a business. What are you talking about, farming thing? I'm a farmer.
Right.
So we have some final questions before we have to go. So the last, I know it's going by really fast. So so for each of us to ask this sort of final question is, so what do you think about the future? You know, are you optimistic about the future of Black people farming, especially our youth? So each one of you answer that question, and I'll ask towards the end. Go.
Okay. I am definitely optimistic. I cannot imagine being in any other space. I think you look around the world and you see people, young people like us, people of color, Black and brown people, from here to Puerto Rico, to Kenya, to Morocco, to wherever. Young people are returning to the land.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they're going back to the land to rediscover their cultural ways, to protect food ways, to protect seed, and bring their children back to the land, right? Where we're everyone is wondering, how is humanity going to survive on this planet, right? If we don't pause and rethink how we're gonna like grow food for humanity, right? The thing is, like, we have the resources, we have the land on this planet, we have the money, we have everything that we need to feed everybody on this planet. Is there a will? Are there people who don't want that to happen? Of course, there's an economic system that it wouldn't benefit from that kind of condition, like where people are just like liberated, growing food, and everyone on the planet is nourished, right? That doesn't work with capitalism. But I think that returning to the land, and we're bringing generations, our children, to the land, and they're developing their own relationship with the land, right? And so we're planting seeds, and going back to the seeds lay dormant, we're planting seeds with our children, and they'll carry it on, right? And this is, and we have to be related to the truth. Like, we are facing a global catastrophe. At this point, we do not have a choice, but like, we have to go back to the land, and food has to be grown everywhere, because the minute that we rely on a food basket coming out of California, and they're experiencing whatever catastrophes, climate related catastrophes that are happening there. I mean, just even look at COVID, right? COVID-19. Communities are like, the people that grow our food, that process our food, are put in danger, right? They're put in harm's way, right? And this doesn't have to be. Jamila and I are here on this farm, and we're able to produce food safely, right? To feed our community safely, right? And this has to we have to create this kind of condition everywhere. We have to multiply this. And in order for that to happen, more and more people are going to have to come back to the land to figure out how we're actually going to move forward and feed humanity. So.
All right, Jamila, you got 2 minutes. Go ahead.
Okay. Restate the question real quick. Am I?
That's exactly. Are you optimistic about the future of Black young people farming?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I'm definitely optimistic. Like I said, I meet people all the time. I get questions all the time. Again, if we as a society, if this is something that we really want to see happen, we have to understand there has to be a redistribution of the wealth. There has to be a redistribution of the land, and that, these operations have to be underwritten by somebody, or like, we have to create a system that enables those young people. There is more than willingness, but by people of color, by young people of color, to do this work. And I do as much as I can. I mentor in whatever way I can. So if people reach out, Jamila, how can I learn? Like, you are more than welcome to come shadow me. I will show you from top to bottom everything that I do. Farming is not rocket science. Okay, it is hard work. There is no secrets. If you go to a farm and people are acting like their system is some coveted system, that's not the farm you need to be at. Everything anybody knows about agriculture has already been done, and they learned from indigenous communities hundreds of years ago. Like, there is nothing new in farming, and all the new stuff that's in farming is a problem. Okay, the only thing that's going to save us is that which sustained us in the past. Okay, and that's that. We just have to come back to that, because the cultures that we try to erase are the cultures that have the answers. So this reconnecting to your culture, like rediscovering your food histories, and like work to discover and know the food history before colonialism. Because there's a lot of things that we own as our food history that is not our food history, right? And that is not our agriculture history. So I am optimistic in the sense of people's interests. I know that it's going to take a whole lot of work for the system to shift, and for these resources to get in the hands of the people that are willing and able and beyond motivated to do the work. And that's where the challenge is. That's where the call is. Like Matthew said, we don't need white allies. We got a lot of people that are allies. We need actual people who are willing to be like, okay, here's my money on the table, or my family has this land.
Right.
You dig one generation below the surface and you'll see, you know, the bloodshed that got you that land, you know. We're ready to give it up. So that is what we need, right? And find those young people and don't burden them with make money for you. It does not need to make any more money for you. You just need to give it up.
Well, thank you so much. So in closing, I want to thank our speakers here, Katheku, Cece, I hope I'm saying it right, I'm getting it right, Jamila, and myself. And I guess one final word I'd like to say, first of all, I'm so glad to be the president of these young Black women farmers. Give it up for them. And then also for me, if you're going to work on food justice, it's an active participation in undoing the social injustice. So if you're not actively participating in working on social injustice, you're not doing food justice.
Absolutely.
Right.